Arya, 31, is a single mother living in a quiet small town where, on the surface, everything seems calm and ordinary. But beneath that peaceful exterior, her life is a constant struggle filled with pressure and exhaustion. 14 months after her divorce, Arya has been left to shoulder every responsibility alone, raising her 6-year-old daughter, Phoebe. The house awarded to her by the court was no gift, it was a heavy burden. There is a monthly mortgage payment she can barely manage, an aging heating system that breaks down far too often, and a neglected backyard that looks as though it has been forgotten for years. Arya's income is just enough to cover the most basic necessities. Every morning, she wakes up before dawn to prepare lunch to take to work, knowing that even buying a simple sandwich outside could throw her tight budget off balance. Arya's life has become a never-ending series of calculations: repair the heater or buy groceries, fill the gas tank or save money for her daughter's school trip, pay the bills, or buy Phoebe a new pair of shoes. Every decision comes with a sacrifice, and none of them are easy. Arya's ex-husband, Troy, contributed only a very small amount of child support, claiming that his income was unstable. When he appeared in court, he deliberately looked disheveled, wrinkled clothes, an unkempt appearance carefully crafting the image of a man barely getting by. Believing him, Arya agreed to the low support payments and tried to manage everything on her own. Yet deep down, something never quite felt right. Every time Phoebe returned from a weekend at her father's house, she brought back something new: a fresh pair of shoes, a new jacket, or stories about eating out at restaurants. These small details slowly fed a quiet, persistent doubt in Arya's mind. How could a man with almost no income afford such a comfortable lifestyle? Still, overwhelmed by exhaustion and the demands of daily survival, Arya forced herself to push those thoughts aside and continued with the familiar grind of her routine. She had no idea that her silence and endurance were unintentionally concealing a horrifying secret, one that existed right inside her own home. That Saturday morning began like any other, so quiet that Arya almost forgot she was living a life weighed down by constant tension. Her daughter had gone to her father's house the night before, leaving the house unusually empty and still. It was a rare chance for Arya to organize things without interruption, and the first task she decided on was hiring someone to clean up and restore the backyard, a space that had been neglected for far too long. The handyman, a man named Garrett, arrived early. He was solidly built, quiet, and got straight to work without much conversation. Arya handed him a spare key so he could use the bathroom if needed, then took the opportunity to drive to the supermarket to buy groceries for the week. While shopping, Arya silenced her phone so she could focus on carefully calculating every item. For her, grocery shopping wasn't a simple errand, it was a survival equation, where every dollar had to be weighed and justified. As she loaded the last bags into the trunk of her car, she casually checked her phone. She froze. 7 missed calls, all from the same number within less than 40 minutes. A cold chill ran down her spine. Without hesitating, Arya immediately called back. Garrett's voice came through the phone low, tight with tension. He asked if anyone else was in the house. Arya answered immediately that there wasn't. Her daughter was at her father's place. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, just long enough for fear to begin seeping into her chest. Then Garrett spoke slowly. While working near the door leading down to the basement, he had heard a child crying, not the sound of a television, not a cat or a rat, but real crying, muffled, trapped behind thick walls. Arya could barely breathe. She didn't have any young children living with her besides Phoebe, and the house was supposed to be completely empty. Garrett told her that after failing to reach her several times, he had no choice but to call the police. Hearing that, Arya sped back home, her mind spiraling through one terrifying possibility after another. The entire drive, her heart pounded violently, her hands clenched around the steering wheel, and a single question echoed over and over in her head. If there really was a child in her basement, who were they, and why were they inside her house? Arya slammed on the brakes in front of her house and saw a police car already parked in the driveway. Her heart dropped straight into her stomach. The gardener stood outside, his face tight with worry and strain. Without wasting a second, he led Arya to the basement entrance at the back of the house, a doorway she had barely used since the divorce. The old metal door, which she had always believed was rusted shut, swung open with disturbing ease. A wave of unease washed over her. Inside, the basement was dark and cold. Stacks of old cardboard boxes had been piled up to form a makeshift barrier. The officers carefully moved the boxes aside, one by one. Slowly, a hidden space began to reveal itself. There was a baby crib, a few toys, bottles, diapers, and a soft mat laid out on the floor. Everything was neatly arranged, like a small living area created specifically for a child. Then Arya heard a faint, broken whimper. Curled up inside the tiny crib was a baby boy, no more than 18 months old. His face flushed red from crying for far too long. Arya stood frozen. She had never seen this child before in her life. Her legs trembled so badly that she had to grip the cold basement wall just to stay upright. Her mind flooded with questions that had no answers. Who had brought this baby into her house? Why hide him in the basement? And most terrifying of all, how long had this been happening without her knowing? Inside a diaper bag placed beside the crib, the police found a medical card stamped with the initials C.L., along with a business card from a pediatric clinic. They followed the lead quickly. When the name surfaced, Arya felt as if she had been struck by lightning. It was her ex-husband's last name. The horrifying truth began to surface. Piece by piece, scattered fragments connected into a picture far darker than anything Arya had ever imagined. In that moment, she understood that the fragile sense of stability she had fought so hard to protect had officially collapsed. And this was only the beginning of a chain of secrets even more disturbing, waiting to be exposed. If you want to know what happens next, comment 1 below, and I'll send the next part. It gets even more shocking. The police moved quickly to verify the child's identity. While medical staff examined the baby's condition, Arya stood motionless in her own basement, a place that had been transformed into a horrifying secret for months without her knowing. Every breath felt heavy, as if the air itself had thickened around her. Less than 30 minutes later, the truth began to surface in a way Arya could hardly believe. The baby's name was Cody. He was 18 months old, the son of Troy, her ex-husband, and another woman named Sabrina. That meant Troy had been involved in an affair while they were still married. Even worse, the child had been conceived during the period when Arya and Troy were in the middle of their divorce proceedings. A wave of shock surged through her body. Painful memories flooded back: cold, silent dinners, bitter arguments, and the growing emotional distance between them, as if the final missing pieces had suddenly snapped into place. But it didn't stop there. The police uncovered that the person who regularly brought Cody to the basement and took care of him was Lenore Troy's mother. Using an old key that once belonged to her son, she had been secretly entering Arya's house for more than 5 months, turning the back section of the basement into a hidden daycare. Every weekday, while Arya was at work and the house stood empty, Lenore would bring Cody over, care for him there, and quietly leave before Arya returned home. In her mind, it was nothing more than temporarily using an unused space. But to Arya, it was a profound violation, an unbearable sense of betrayal and deception, carried out inside the very place she had called her home. The moment Lenore appeared in the yard, holding a bag of medicine and a bottle of sports drink, every lingering doubt was confirmed. The confusion and panic in her eyes betrayed the truth she could no longer hide. As Arya looked at the woman, a storm of emotions rose inside her: anger, pain, and a deep, bitter sense of betrayal. She realized that all this time, she hadn't merely been the victim of a failed marriage. She had been trapped inside a carefully constructed web of lies, where secrets were protected by silence and a complete disregard for other people's boundaries. After the shock of discovering the child in her basement, Arya began to piece together every strange detail that had surfaced in her life over the past months. The new items Phoebe brought home after weekends with her father, the restaurant meals, the outings that seemed far too luxurious for the income Troy had claimed in court. Suddenly, everything made sense. A powerful instinct pushed Arya to uncover the truth about her ex-husband's finances. She knew that behind the hidden child, there had to be even larger secrets waiting to be exposed. Through a close friend's recommendation, Arya contacted an experienced family lawyer and a forensic accountant. What they uncovered in the weeks that followed left her both stunned and furious. Troy was not the struggling man he had portrayed himself to be. In reality, he held a full-time job with a salary several times higher than what he had declared. And that wasn't all. Troy had also been quietly operating two highly profitable laundromats. The income was steady and substantial but carefully funneled through multiple intermediary accounts to avoid detection. Bank statements, business registration records, and income reports were stacked across the lawyer's desk, each page another piece of evidence Troy could no longer deny. When the final figure emerged, Arya felt dizzy. Troy's actual income was nearly 6 times higher than what he had declared in court during their divorce. For more than a year, while Arya had been cutting back on meals, going without new clothes, and struggling day after day to provide for her daughter, Troy had been living comfortably secure, well-funded, and quietly building a second family behind the scenes. The truth was painful and infuriating, but more than anything, it ignited a determination Arya had never felt before. She no longer wanted to suffer in silence. This was no longer just about money, it was about justice for her daughter, for the months of hardship, and for every unseen sacrifice she had made. Arya knew the time had come. She would stand up, expose everything that had been hidden, and fight for what rightfully belonged to her and her child. With all the evidence in hand, Arya officially launched a legal counterattack to overturn the original divorce ruling. Her attorney swiftly filed a motion requesting the court to reassess the child support arrangement, while formally accusing Troy of systematically concealing his income. The thick case file, packed with bank statements, business licenses, and commercial lease agreements, turned the case into a legal bombshell that left Troy's side completely unprepared. On the day of the hearing, Troy arrived, wearing his usual mask of confidence. He tried to maintain the image of a devoted father, a man unfairly targeted by his ex-wife. But as each piece of evidence was presented before the court, the color slowly drained from his face. The cold numbers displayed on the screen left no room for denial. Every clumsy excuse collapsed under the sharp, relentless questioning of Arya's lawyer. The atmosphere in the courtroom grew suffocatingly tense. The judges pressed Troy repeatedly, demanding explanations for every source of income and every suspicious transaction. Each time he hesitated or stumbled, Arya clenched her hands tighter, acutely aware of her heart pounding in her chest. This was no longer just a legal battle. It was a fight for justice, and for her daughter's future. At last, the verdict was delivered. The court ruled that Troy had deliberately concealed his income over an extended period of time and ordered a substantial increase in child support, along with retroactive payments covering the entire past period. In addition, Troy was handed a severe financial penalty for fraud. As the judge's gavel struck the bench, Arya felt as though a massive weight had finally been lifted from her chest. Stepping out of the courtroom, Arya took a deep breath. She knew this was only the beginning of reclaiming the life she and her daughter deserved. If you want to know what happens next, when the secret hidden in the basement begins to unravel, and Troy starts paying an even heavier price, comment 1 below to see the next part. After the trial, Arya thought the worst might finally be over, but deep down, she knew the child in the basement was still an unanswered question. That was the biggest secret of all, the final piece needed to complete the picture of the truth. She decided to return to Troy's old house, this time not as an ex-wife, but as a mother searching for answers for her child. With the support of the police and social services, Arya was granted permission to inspect the entire house, including the basement Troy had deliberately kept hidden. When the heavy metal door creaked open, a damp, moldy stench rushed toward her, sending a chill down her spine. Inside was a small, cramped room, a worn-out bed, a few battered toys, a single dim light casting weak shadows across the walls. The sight made Arya's heart tighten. The documents found at the scene gradually revealed a heartbreaking truth. The child was the son of an immigrant woman who had lived with Troy for a short period of time. When the mother suddenly disappeared, Troy kept the baby but never reported it to the authorities. He didn't enroll the child in school. He didn't tell anyone the child even existed. Instead, he raised him in the shadows, treating his existence as a secret that had to be buried at all costs. What enraged Arya the most was the reason behind it all. It wasn't love, it was fear. Troy was terrified that the child's discovery would expose the illegal benefits he had been receiving and the underground financial network he had been maintaining. The baby became a hostage to an adult man's crimes, forced to live in isolation, deprived of affection, safety, and even the most basic protection. When Arya finally met the child, those clear yet frightened eyes broke her completely. She couldn't hold back her tears. In that moment, she understood that beyond the fight for justice for her own daughter, there was another small life that needed to be rescued from the darkness. And from that moment on, Arya knew her journey was not over. It had entered an entirely new chapter, one where compassion, responsibility, and courage would decide everything. After that brief encounter in the basement, the image of the child's frightened eyes continued to haunt Arya. Even after leaving the house, she felt as though a part of her heart was still trapped inside that damp, shadowed room. What she felt wasn't just momentary pity, it was something deeper. A quiet but relentless call from her conscience, urging her to act, even if it meant stepping into a path filled with difficulty and risk. Arya quickly reached out to social services, recounting everything that had happened and submitting all the evidence she had gathered. The legal process was complex and painfully slow, but she refused to give up. Every time she imagined the child being placed in an overcrowded temporary shelter, deprived of warmth and affection, her resolve only grew stronger. She wanted to become the child's temporary guardian so that, at the very least, he could have a safe home while authorities searched for his biological relatives. That decision was anything but easy. Arya faced immense pressure from society, from both families, and from the cruel whispers of judgment. Some said she was inviting trouble, that taking on more responsibility would only make her already fragile life even heavier. But Arya understood one thing clearly. If everyone turned away, that child would be abandoned all over again. In the early days of living together, the two of them barely spoke. The child curled up in the corner of the room, startled by every unfamiliar sound. Arya moved slowly and patiently, preparing warm meals, reading bedtime stories, taking short walks beneath the soft glow of the evening sun. Little by little, the fear in the child's eyes gave way to curiosity and a fragile sense of trust. The moment the child smiled for the first time, Arya knew every hardship had been worth it. She hadn't just saved a life from the darkness, she had found a new purpose of her own. From that point on, Arya's life turned onto a different path, one where love was no longer defined by blood, but by choice, courage, and the willingness to stay.